Hello and welcome back. I'm Deirdre and today it's all about getting out of debt. I'm going to start with the really most simple one and we're just going to get straight into it. Now, if you've missed my first session with this, I'll put the card up here and that will lay out for you the beginning of this, which is to stop getting into debt in the first place. You've got to stop adding to your debt. You've got to live under your income. Now, how you do that, to some degree, that's up to you. Maybe you just have to cut your expenses. Maybe you simply can't cut them that much and you have to get a second job. It's up to you. There are only two choices. You either cut your expenses and you live under your income, or you add to your income with a second job or a new job or a pay rise or something along those lines. So there's no magic in here. You're not going to win the lottery. Let's face it, the odds are pretty much against it. And there is no white knight, apart from this one, galloping in to save you. So you've got to start with that and live under your income. Spend less than you earn. It also means that you stop using your credit cards, you stop applying for extra loans, you stop drawing down on the equity in your home perhaps that you might have been doing, any of these things that have added to your debt. Okay? That's a tough one. Now there is one exception and I will leave that to step two. Step two is you've got to build, you in focus, here we go, you have got to build an emergency fund. This is your initial emergency fund and I can't tell you how much needs to be in that. A lot of people say $1,000. I think it needs to be at least $2,000, sometimes more. Now, I know this is hard, but this is the one that is going to stop you from falling into debt when that emergency happens. When you have to buy plane tickets to fly somewhere because a friend is ill or has passed away and you've got to go to the funeral, it's got to stop you. God, that was a grim one, wasn't it? Really? Anyway, that's one. I mean, it's happened to me, so I know what it feels like. Yeah, so those are the sorts, your cat gets injured and you have to go into debt to have it looked after. And that happens. Been there, done that. So the exception to using your credit cards is that until you have built your emergency fund, for emergencies only, this is not, hey, I saw something I really liked and would love in my home. No, sorry, that is not an emergency. No. So this is the only time you would use your credit cards or take a loan until you have funded your emergency fund with $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever it is that, the amount that you would feel safe with initially to stop one of those immediate crisis moments from sending you skyrocketing back into debt. Whatever that amount is, until it's been funded, then that's the only time you can use your credit card. And where does the money come from to fund this emergency stash? It comes from your budget, that anything that is left over after you have funded your absolute essentials in your expenses and you've paid your minimums on your credit cards, your personal loans, whatever that you've got outstanding, any amount that is left over, any amount, and also from selling anything that isn't tied down in your home that you really can live without, anything like that, you put all of it into that emergency fund and you put it in a little account tucked to the side of your main accounts so that you don't touch it. You can only use this, remember, in an emergency. Right, step 3. This is where you get to list your debts. Put in how much you owe, what the interest rate is, if there's any time limit on it, anything that's relevant to that debt, put it in, list it. Now, the one I would call an exception is your home loan. I treat that as a completely different animal, and that comes up in the debt repayment much further along the line. And it's building an asset. It's not consumer debt in the same way that your credit cards, your personal loans, all of those things are. So we're going to concentrate on those sorts of debts, but not your mortgage at this point. Okay. Now we're ready for step 4. Now step 4 is where it gets a bit complicated. I don't want to say that because it scares people off, but you have to make a decision. And when I talked to you right at the beginning of Simple September, I talked about this concept of agency, where if you make decisions for you, you are much more likely to support them, to go along with them. people support what they create. Well, if you're creating your own process and you're making your own decisions about what is the most important thing about your debt that you want to list them by and how you want to go about paying them back, then you are much more likely to respect yourself and to follow through. Now, that is why I had you list it in relation to all sorts of things, the amount, the interest rate, etc. And I'll show you that in a minute. So don't get scared off at this point, but you will have to make a decision, and that's a good thing. Your debt, your decision, and that way you're much, much more likely to follow through. So there are 5 ways to go about paying off your debt, to decide what the list will look like, how you will prioritize that repayment. Now, the first one is the classic, the snowball, the debt snowball, where you list your debts from the smallest to the largest, and you start putting everything, this is, remember, after you've funded that initial emergency fund, then everything that was going into that, after you've made your minimum payments, everything that is left over then goes into that smallest loan. And this is, psychologically, this is the winner, that you pay off your debt smallest to largest, because it gives you those little wins that keep you motivated and keep you wanting to do it. So you pay off the smallest one and you go, yay! And then you've got all of the amount that you were putting into the smallest one, plus the minimum payment that you had to make to the smallest one. Now you make the minimum payment to the second one on the list, and you put everything else that had been going into the smallest one. Now you hit it into that second one on the list, hence the snowball. You're rolling along and you're picking up all that extra as you go, and you're adding it to the next one on the list. Now, the only thing I know about this that is a bit of a catch is that you come to the last one, that biggest loan, the one that has probably worried you the most, and it is by definition going to take you the longest to pay off because it's the biggest. And even though you're hitting it with all of your free cash flow, it is still going to take longer to pay off than that initial little hit from the first one. So be aware that you might get a bit disheartened, but if you're, what you're aware of is often something that you can then avoid. You can, hey, I'm getting down about this. Oh, but I should have expected this. Okay, so hang in there. So that's the debt snowball. Now the next one is that you list them according to, can you see that? According to interest rates. There we are, I hope that's better. Sorry about my things. So I couldn't find my cards. Anyway, so you list them according to your interest rates, highest to lowest, and this is called the Avalanche way of doing it. And you start hitting everything that is left over once you've made the minimum payments. Then you put all of them into the highest interest rate loan. And you then go through that process. You pay the highest one off first, and then everything gets hit into the second highest interest rate one, and so it goes on. So yes, it's sort of like a snowball on steroids, because you're actually limiting the amount you're going to have to repay over time. There's no way around it. This is financially the smartest way to do it. But psychologically, it doesn't win. People do not follow through on this in anything like the same amount as the same level as they do with the first one, with the snowball, because first and foremost, we are humans. We need to be encouraged, we need motivation, and because of that, this one isn't actually as effective as the snowball. Having said that, if you're an accountant, you're going to say, yes, this is the way to do it. Chances are, if you're an accountant, you haven't let yourself get into this sort of hideous debt. Maybe not in the first place. Now, number 3. Number 3 is, there we are, I'm trying to make sure you can see it. The light's all shining off, there we are. Number 3 is the cash flow impact that your repayments have. So this is the one where you work hardest on the one that pulls the most out of your cash flow. So you might have minimum payments of $30, $40, $20, and one of them is a $250 minimum repayment. Now that one would come first, barring any penalties that would be associated with paying it off early. This is often the case with, say, a personal loan that you've taken out for a certain amount of time, and you in fact are paying off all of the interest on that loan up front, so that if you pay it off early, they actually have to refund you some of the interest. I know this is getting a bit complex, but it does happen, and so they often attach a penalty to paying it early, because there are complications with working out how you're going to, in fact, get the interest rate back and things like that. It's worth having a look at this and even talking to them and balancing out whether the early repayment penalty is in fact greater than your interest rate repayment to you if you pay it off early. Talk to somebody who's a bit, in the know about this and sort it out. But that is certainly one that can suddenly, if you've got that big repayment out of the way, then that then goes on to all of the smaller ones. So you work from highest cash flow impact to lowest cash flow impact. Now we're up to number D, and D is scribbled out at the top because I was saying it was number 4. This is the one that has the highest emotional impact on you. This is the one where you list them according to what keeps you awake at night, and in that case it can be the one that you think is the stupidest, like you bought the car you can't afford, or you've got it on a lease that's just too expensive so you want to pay it off. And it's the one that gnaws at you. It may not be the smartest one in terms of the snowball effect or the interest rate hit or your cash flow hit, but it's the one that is gnawing at you. And because of that, it may be the smartest one to get rid of first. It may be the one you need the most to motivate you to keep going. Perhaps you've taken a loan from a friend and it's something that's never particularly a good idea, but in an emergency it happens. So that may be one you have to pay off for your own self-respect. And so I wouldn't automatically say, oh no, it has to fit into the smarter psychological or financial sort of concept there. I would say slam it, get it off your back, get your sleep back again. And now we come to the last one, which is the 5th way. So it's the E on my list, but it's number 5. It's the one with the time penalty that is going to hit you, and you're going to pay back in relation to soonest through to the longest time period. And what I mean by this is that, oh, credit transfer, how wonderful, you can get 24 months interest free. That is amazing, yes. And you grab it and you transfer into that credit card for the 24 months interest free. But what happens in month 25 if you haven't paid it off? And that's where you find that there are all sorts of conditions often, and at the very least you're going to suddenly be hit with a pretty high interest rate on that. That's the best possible outcome if you have not paid it off within that 24-month period. So I would say get it out, get it over and done with, and perhaps that's the one that you close and you get it out completely. So you avoid the slam at the end of it. Okay, that's all I'm going to talk to you about today. There's a lot to think about in there, and I'll be back with the part 3 of this, where we deal with the next emergency fund level. When do you pay off your mortgage, and what else are you going to be doing in terms of investing? So that will be my part 3. So come along, subscribe, and let me know what you think, where do you fall, or any ideas you have about your debt. And remember, at any age, at any stage, we can fall into these traps, and we need our skills to get us out. And remember, it's all about agency. It's the one that you pick that will work best for you, not the one I pick for you, or your accountant, or your friend who knows all about these things. It's got to be you, because your choice will be the thing that you go through with, that you understand the best, and that you will follow through on. So there we are. I hope that whatever you're doing, you're having a wonderful time, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.